So while the world was reflecting on what Pope Leo had to say about artificial intelligence, Catholics decided to make things super weird and say how we are not allowed to French kiss. And that is what the internet, well, the little Catholic side of the internet is talking about a lot right now. There's a lot of debates going on Instagram and YouTube. And we figured we'd have that conversation here and kind of talk to you about what the Catholic Church teaches and how we think a couple should go about deciding whether or not to use tongue.
You ready?
Yeah, so we are going to answer the question really quickly. It depends, and we're just going to leave it there.
That's it.
No, but if
Episode's over. I do get why this is a topic of conversation. I understand why people have different points of view, or I can understand why there's some wrestling and some tension in it, though, because there's such a desire. We kind of just want to know, like, what's the line? Like, how far is too far? What am I allowed to do? Because I have these feelings of attraction and affection for the person that I'm dating, that I'm engaged to, and even my spouse. And you're like, what am I allowed to do with those things, with those feelings? And I also want to pursue holiness. I don't want to be sinning. I don't want to cause the person that I love to sin. And so you're kind of like, can somebody just tell me what to do and how to do it, right? And there's different ways of managing that answer. So then it can feel unsatisfactory to the person who's like, but just tell me what I'm allowed to do and not allowed to do. And so I think that I can understand both perspectives, because you're like, one side doesn't want you to feel like you need to be that scrupulous and that concerned about making a mistake that without intention, like, isn't quite as grave or as dramatic as black and white would make you feel. But then also at the same time, if you leave too many things open-ended, then it's up to interpretation, and then whose interpretation is correct, because actually, like, heaven is real and like sin is sin. And so there's a wrestling and a tension.
This has only happened like 10 days ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, but the way that the internet is kind of dividing amongst the faithful social media Catholics. You have the people who are asking for the rules and who are saying that no, the church has always taught that passionate kissing, any type of French kissing or making out for unmarried couples is a sin, are usually the younger, more traditional leaning Catholics. And then you see the other side who is arguing, kind of make an argument for why it's not sinful to do that. They are tending to be more of the older millennial, mid-millennial Catholics who are heavily influenced by JP2. And both, I think, are speaking past each other if you go to the different debates and arguments of the internet. And they're doing something called appeal to authority. When you argue, you appeal to, like, well, this saint said this, well, this church father said this, well, this pope said this moral theologian said this, and you kind of go back and forth in arguing. So if you also don't believe, if I think I have a pope that said a thing, and then you had another pope who said a thing, I think my pope is bigger than your pope. And it becomes kind of like a Pokemon battle of like, well,
the battle of the popes.
Pope uses papal bull to say, no, oh, Caro Wojtyła wrote this, and he says, and it just becomes an argument that again, we're speaking past each other. We're trying to say that, no, I have the right answer. And I think there's more to the discussion than just a black and white answer, because human answers require more than just a yes or no.
Yeah. And I think it's funny that comes out, that this kind of conversation argument really came to a head the same week that Pope Leo's encyclical on the magnificence of humanity comes out, and how...
No, we're idiots, actually.
But that AI can never replace humanity, because it's not just going to spit back, like AI, artificial intelligence, just spits back data. It like collects data and then pushes out best answer for this, the way that this question was worded or what have you, and how humanity is more complicated and complex and nuanced. And while there is truth and there's good and bad and yes and no, but like then there's human experience within that.
I think it's, at the same time, I think it's important because, like you said, there's still a whole host of Catholics who want an answer to this because they want to be able to live their faith out the right way within the relationship. So I wanted to take both of the people who kind of teed this off and kind of take their arguments so that we can present them well and then kind of give our take on it. So Elizabeth Busby.
Busby, I think.
Is it Busby?
Mm-hmm.
I hope I pronounced that wrong. Right. No, I hope I pronounced it right. Sorry, Elizabeth. I hope I did not pronounce it wrong. So her main argument, she is from this TOB Institute. That's Christopher West Institute. He's the president there. And she started this whole thing off by answering this question on YouTube. And she was peppered with a few different questions of what you could do during engagement. And she said, you can go back and watch the video. I'll try to link it in the show notes. But she says basically that it's okay for an engaged couple to French kiss /make out. as a way of trying to grow closer together. Like that was her argument. And then she was saying it's not okay to, it won't lead to intercourse. It shouldn't lead to anything else beyond that. And that it's up to their prudential judgment, and that it's not the same case for all Catholic couples.
She gave different like circumstances and scenarios to nuance the conversation, that like, even though I'm saying that I'm being Elizabeth, like even though I'm saying it is acceptable, that doesn't mean it's acceptable for every couple
everyone.
In every scenario, in every circumstance, in every situation. So it's not a yes all the time, but it's also not a no for every single situation either, because of intent, because of the reason to enter into that kind of intimacy and affection with one another, and also the formed conscience of both people in the relationship. So are we able to enter into this kind of intimacy and know that that's all it is for, is to show affection and care for one another? I'm not hoping it leads somewhere else. I'm also able to alert myself and you that if I start to have stronger feelings or desires, that I'm able to stop the behavior at that point so that it doesn't lead, or so that we're not tempted to lead to the next step. And so it's a lot about the formation of the couple as individuals and then as a couple together.
I also think she does a good job of explaining any type of arousal that you might experience during that kind of kissing. Any kind of arousal like that it's not inherently sinful just because you are aroused. And not in, because a lot of, I know when Christopher West started sharing about theology of body in the 80s and 90s, a lot of it was that like you have desires that have a true fulfillment, and just because you have certain desires does not mean that those are automatically sinful or wrong to experience them. And we've talked about this in other episodes, how it's a very different view between like the Protestant idea of our desires and like the Catholic view of concupiscence and all that. So along the same line, she's saying that within this, that like your desire to be with this other person, or if you experience arousal during this kind of kissing, as an engaged couple, that is not necessarily sinful in and of itself, and to kind of differentiate between like that experience and the actual acts that go beyond and the using of the other person, which again is very TOB, very theology of the body, very, very JP2. But I think that what answers she gave were not sufficient for the younger Catholic audience who does want a very clear line. Because a lot of the things that you and I just said could be seen as, yeah, that's a perfect recipe for me to be wishy-washy and kind of find loopholes in how I can be more sensual and more affectionate with my significant other when I shouldn't be, because this should be reserved for only married people. And that puts us to the response video by Christian Wagner. I forgot, what was his middle initial? B?
When I first read your text to me, I immediately thought of Michael Jordan versus Michael B. Jordan,
Yep.
The basketball player versus the actor. But then all I could think about after that was Dwight K. Schrute, like when he was when he was serious about something.
But in fairness, Christian B. Wagner, I thought he did a very good job. And this is one thing that I really appreciate with the more traditional, the younger generation of Catholics that are now, like, they're mostly in their early 20s to mid 20s and early 30s. I don't know, maybe. They do a really good job of laying out very well thought out arguments. And they make sure to define terms very early. They're able to pull out the sources that they need to support their arguments, and they structure their arguments really, really well. And I thought he did a really good job. The main part of his argument was that making out and French kissing for couples, not married couples, is done in order to bring about some type of sexual arousal. And that if all sexual arousal like that is only properly ordered in marriage, then any type of arousal outside of marriage is disordered and therefore sinful. And so his argument then used a Pope, St. Thomas Aquinas, I don't remember, and then a couple of other moral theologians just explaining that again, the crux of the argument was that if making out and French kissing elicits and is made to pursue this kind of sexual desire, and if it naturally always leads to desire more sexual things, then you're putting yourself in a near occasion of sin, and or you're sinning because you're purposely going to do this thing that is meant to be only allowed in marriage, because that kind of sexual desire activity, getting all hot and bothered, is not meant to be a thing that you do when you're dating or engaged. And that was his main argument. And I thought he did a really good job laying that out. And I think other influencers and other content creators kind of jumped on that. And I think they've done a good job of laying that out, of like, if you are kissing this person because you want to be sexual with them in some way, and you're like, well, this is the only way I can be sexual right now because we can't get married, then you shouldn't be kissing them. And I would completely agree. And I think what you and I would argue is that that is not why making out happens.
Mm-hmm.
Or at least for us, that's not why making out happens.
Yeah, I think something that's, like you said, very good that there's a clear definition of like terminology. And yeah, so that like we're all saying the same things. We're all saying the same words and meaning the same thing when we're entering into these kind of conversations. And I think one distinction that you and I try to make when talking to dating couples and engaged couples and even married couples is the distinction between arousal and lust, and those two things are not the same, that there certainly is arousal within lust, but arousal in and of itself is not the vice of lust or the sin of lust. I think that might be important to highlight when you're talking about the behavior of tongue kissing. So he certainly is absolutely correct that like that kind of passionate kissing can be arousing because of where your hands go or because of the emotions that you feel. And like having strong emotions can lead to, especially if it's somebody that you love, can lead to arousal. And then that is where the couple needs to be a discerning couple of, okay, now here we have these feelings and arousal is ordered toward the end, which is sex. And so if we are pursuing this behavior of tongue kissing for the feeling of arousal, that arousal needs to be properly ordered and placed within marriage. Versus though, I think that like other words and phrases that you might want to try to define is also like intimacy and affection. And so I think that it is really important though for couples to be aware of the potentials that could happen with arousal and then like what to do with that. So I think that the caution that he's using is well intended and well placed, that in where we are right now, where like arousal doesn't seem like a thing that is necessarily that important or something to be aware of. Be aware of that so that you're not misusing your arousal, so that you're not seeking arousal, because we are seeking pleasure in our world all the time. We're seeking comfort all the time. And we don't want to place our most important human relationship in a position to be misused like that and to be just self-seeking and pleasure-seeking.
Well, and I think, so I wanted to steelman his argument too to make sure that we're not misrepresenting him, but I think his main argument would come before that, saying that if the only purpose people have for that kind of kissing is for arousal.
Okay.
And I think
that's his claim.
That's the claim that seems to be kind of buoying the rest of the argument, that
okay.
The reason this isn't something you should be doing unless you're married is because what other purpose is there to kiss like that? And one argument and this is like the argument that I think this is where they're speaking past each other, because I don't think Busby I think she's kind of she's thinking of it like us, of there's many reasons to kiss this way. Whereas I think...
Which is not just to seek arousal.
Right, not just seek arousal. And I think for a lot, and I don't know the people who are creating content around this, because I'm an old man, and I don't look it, but I'm old. I think for a lot of them, they are most likely single or engaged, or they're newly married. Mm-hmm. And I remember being that age, and that's why you tongue kissed. Because like, hey, this is going to be great. So like I think when you're younger and earlier in a relationship, like that's why you do that. But I think from our perspective of being married almost 14 years, that doesn't hold the same weight in the same way. Like I write in the Substack article about how when you were on bed rest with our fifth baby, and there was a lot of things we did to be united and be close to each other, but sex wasn't one of them. And if we did tongue kiss at all, it wasn't because I wanted to be sexually close to you. Because I knew there wasn't going to be any sex happening, and I didn't desire any sex because... And
we weren't doing other simulating sexual activities to be intimate.
Things.
Sorry,
no.
To be clear, because you were kind of like, we did a lot of things to be united.
Oh,
we
yeah,
didn't do those things.
No, like I meant like laundry and hold you when you were crying. Sorry, yes. I did.
Yes.
With clothes on.
Yes.
The laundry with... Maybe, but
sorry, I just wanted that to be clear.
No, that's a good clarification.
There are a lot of other ways to be intimate with your beloved that have no sexual value to them, like no sexual implication, nothing.
And I think maybe I'm speaking just for myself, but I think for a lot of us who have understood St. John Paul and the theology of the body and him revealing what Christ, the kind of freedom that Jesus wants for us, have been able to take the teachings of St. John Paul II and integrate them into how we see sexuality, how we see our marriage, and how we see the union that we have together in the act of sex. And we realize that it's whenever I pursue you for any reason, it's to be with you, not for the pleasure I receive, not for the fact that I get to have sex, not for the fact that I get to like have you touch me, but it's because I want to be with you. So in my mind, whenever there is that kind of kissing, like it's just, I want to be with you. There's no, I don't do it for arousal. I don't do it to like spark a flame even within ourselves of like, even if we're not going to go any further. And I think for people who haven't either because they haven't been married long enough to see like that's what should be happening to our desires, like that's the redeeming of desires that should happen through the sacrament of marriage, or because they haven't been in a relationship where they've done that work to see like, hey, you know what, actually when I pursue you, it's actually because I'm feeling bad about myself, and that's why I actually want you to show me affection.
I want your affirmation,
which is something that happened within our marriage, or it's like, yeah, I just want affirmation, that's why I pursue my wife, or that's why I pursue my beloved. And I think there's a lot in his claim that says that you only pursue these things for this reason. I think that is the claim that's incorrect, because I think there's a lot of reasons to pursue that. And if it's ever for use of another person, even if you're married or unmarried or whatever, if you're ever doing it to use the other person and not doing it to be with them, then it's disordered and is wrong and sinful anyway.
Yes, I agree with that. I think that that's really important to be aware of for yourself, of like, why am I treating this person in this way? Is it for them? Is there some level of manipulation and coercion to get what I want, some sort of gratification for myself, some sort of pleasure for myself? Or is it to show them as perfect as possible love and care and attention? And so I think that when it comes to this idea of tongue kissing, French kissing, passionately kissing, that like rightly ordered, it can absolutely be done without a sinful indication, without a sinful implication, because it is a special way that you can show affection and care for a distinct person that you love differently from brothers, sisters, friends. And it can be done outside of marriage, because the direction, the purpose of dating is to be discerning of that like, is this the person that will have my entireness, like my whole self? And so that is a way to show them that kind of care and affection that is distinct from the rest of the population, the rest of the people that you're around. And it can just be that special behavior that isn't intended to be arousing, but just be intimate and affectionate. And I think that when there's a lot of places where that has been blurred, and so it's understandable though why some people are like, but be clear about it. And I think that the danger in being so black and white about every kind of affectionate behavior without this explanation of intent and internal freedom and your willpower and your desires, and being aware of your arousal and your desires, is that you can get into soul good, body bad quickly if you're not practicing that discernment, if you're not practicing that awareness. Because if you're just like, everything over here is a no-go until the sacrament of marriage, and then that can be really hard to like switch over, that like all of this behavior is now okay. And then it's also very challenging before marriage to see any sort of thing that you're like, wait, I'm aroused now and I didn't tongue kiss, like how bad am I? You know, and like, so because
I walked in the
room, right? So you can, there's a potential, again, if you're not practicing this discernment and self-awareness, that you would miss in that dating and engaged period of time, that as you're pursuing and leading towards marriage, that you could think like everything that my body does and all of my desires, all of my wants are disordered. Or you could also then be like not sure how to chastely live within marriage and how to have these behaviors, and how to not be ashamed of how it makes your body feel, or also continue to pursue it. Well, because now we're married, so like I can have all of that all the time when I desire it. I just, because I want all of you. And so
you can still be using your spouse in marriage if you don't order these things, right? And I think that a place where, at least where I see it, mixing both of the arguments together is, I think you start with the rule, right? I think if you're early dating, there should be no touch kissing,
touch
none of that
kissing,
either. No tongue kissing, French kissing, like no passionate kissing happening. If you're first few dates, you're just early dating, even the first few months in, like I don't think that's good. I don't think that's prudent, because you are setting yourself for failure against your chastity, and also for your discernment if this is the person that you should marry, because you're allowing a lot of extra things to be involved in your relationship.
Feelings and hormones.
Yes,
and,
like you have to be aware of yourself there. I do think, though, once you are engaged, I think it's allowable if you are willing to self-reflect on the why you're pursuing and how you're pursuing. And I think also, as people who are the authors of Lovemaking, How to Talk About Sex with Your Spouse, if you're able to have honest conversations with your hopefully future spouse, like with your fiance, about why we're doing this, how you are feeling when we do it, how I'm feeling when we do it. Because one person within the couple, one of the fiancés, could, usually this was Monica, could feel like I'm completely unbothered by this because I just like kissing you and I don't feel any hot and botheredness at all. And then Renzo, on the other hand, is like, how far could we take this, right? And if we didn't have this conversation as an engaged couple, but if we had, we could be like, you know what, this is not the prudent thing for us to do now. And then we can't stop at the line. It can't just be like, well, because it's imprudent to do it right now because we might mess up. Instead, we should look at it as, it's imprudent for us to do now, and Renzo has a lot of work to do to allow Jesus to help him redeem these desires so that he doesn't go into marriage thinking that Monica is only for these reasons so that I could then go use and be able to finally have all this sexual fulfillment once I get married, because that's not how marriage works. And I think if a couple's able to do that well, then I think it is allowable for them to do when they're engaged. If they're discerning as they're doing it, if they're practicing the different virtues, especially the virtue of prudence and chastity throughout this, and if they are willing to then do the harder work and have the understanding of what theology of the body calls them to. Because again, it's not a line that now you're married, oh, now I can cross it. Right? It's a transformation that should be happening within you, that you then allow the sacrament to transform you even further. And if we're not doing that, and if we're just looking for a line and then we get married, we're going to be really frustrated after we get married. No matter how well we do or how good we are at following the rules and staying behind the line, as soon as we get married, if we feel like that means all bets are off, we are going to have a very difficult first few years of marriage.
Yeah. And I think your point about having this conversation as an engaged couple is really important too, because if bringing up that point in conversation is too intimidating or too scary, that's like a big clue that you have to have that conversation, or you're not ready to get married, because you have to have these uncomfortable but very like to the point conversations. And if you're thinking that you can be totally intimate and vulnerable in the bedroom after being married, but you can't be open and vulnerable in a conversation, then like that's a big clue that you guys have work to do. It doesn't mean that there's no hope at all, but it's a good indicator of how are these conversations going? What does it feel like to talk about these things? Can I say those words out loud? Are you able to be honest with the person when they ask, like, actually, yes, when I kiss this way, then I start to think about this, and this. And are you able to receive that honesty without being hurt and defensive? Or are you able to at least like share that, like, oh man, that kind of hurts, that when we kiss with tongue, when we kiss passionately, you start thinking about what it will be like when we are this way and this way. And when I'm kissing you that way, I'm just thinking about, I love you so much and I'm so grateful you're in my life. I'm so happy that we're growing together and I'm really just trying to show you affection. If we're coming at this from different places, I think that's why Busby says like it's not a line for every couple, but it could be, because if we're both or one of us is going beyond a sign of like an intimate sign of affection and going towards the sexual realm of it, then that's the line. And we need to like pull back and we need to stop kissing this way until we've done the interior work on this, until we've gone to confession, until we've prayed about it, until we've found other areas in our life that we maybe are not as virtuous in, because virtue outside of the sexual realm helps virtue within the sexual realm. And then continuing to talk through that together as a couple, and being very like sensitive to the other person of like, okay, I'm going to keep my hands, I'm going to, and just like affirm for you and show for you that I'm doing this because I love you and all of who you are, not what you bring and give to me.
Yeah. And I think that's why our answer for this question is it depends. And I know I said that earlier, But it depends. It can't just be a black and white answer. And I know that for social media and for any type of internet personality, content creator, anything, like we want them to be able to give us the exact answer that matters to us and that speaks to us directly. And that's just not how the faith was made to be passed down. I know that we also, we're online and we do things too, but we try to really keep things very pastoral in our answers because the answer that works for one couple won't work for another. And I think if we're looking for answers, what we can do, the best thing we could do is connect some way to a parish, to a church, to find real people that can actually walk with us and actually talk with us through things, because that is how the faith and discipleship actually works and actually ought to work. I know, like swinging it back to the Pope Leo's thing with AI towards the end of the encyclical, he talks about let's build relationships, let's build communities together. That's what we should be doing so that we could have more people that can sit with other couples and walk them through these things so that they're not just constantly going to the internet or ChatGPT or anything else looking for answers like this. Like this is something that should be done within the church because the church is a family that is willing to walk with other people.
Yeah. So if you're a couple that's been married for a while and you're like, this isn't relevant to me, I'm going to tell you, like, there are couples that are asking these questions. So go to your parish office and go to your pastor and say, like, hey, if there's an engaged couple that wants to meet with a couple that's married, put me on the list. Give them my phone number, give them our email.
First, read Theology of the Body and Love and Responsibility so you have an idea of how to answer some of these things. They could read something else.
Lovemaking by Monica and Renzo Ortega. But if you're a couple who's like, this is not something that I need to be discerning of, well, then you can be active in finding couples to help them discern this process. And if you're dating an engaged couple that is discerning marriage, pursuing marriage, go to your priest, your pastor, and be like, hey, is there another couple that you can connect us with? Because we'd really like to learn how to have some of these conversations, navigate some of these conversations. So that's one way to build community. If you're like, I don't know how to go about that. Do I just ask, like, go up to somebody after mass? Like, well, maybe, but like, also put yourself out there in a more organized fashion too, so that you're contactable and so that you're available, and go from there.
Yeah. And I know this may not be the perfect answer. And if you really feel like you have nobody, we do not sell courses. We do not sell any like private chats that you could contact us through. Like we don't do that. We do have a book that I mentioned like 3 times here. It's called Lovemaking, How to Talk About Sex with Your Spouse, that we co-authored. We wrote it in both our voices, meaning that like I wrote part of it, Monica wrote part of it, and it says who wrote what part. And we try to write it in a way that you have us with you answering all the different questions you might have about sex and how to talk about sex with your spouse. We think it's great for engaged couples and married couples, even if you've been married way longer than us. But we tried to make it pastoral, but also very Catholic and Orthodox so that you know where the line is, but also understand there's a lot more that you might be carrying that needs to hear something different.
Yeah, one day our kids are going to realize that we wrote a book about sex, and it's going to be an interesting day, but you can make it worth it by buying this book and buying it for yourselves or buying it for a couple that's getting married or a newlywed couple or an oldlywed couple, or you could buy a couple copies for your parish so your priest can give them out. But we believe very, very strongly in the book and the project because it's really meant to be about the couple having good conversations, not about all the answers that Monica and Renzo have. So we feel really strongly about that, and we hope that this conversation, this podcast episode, starts some good conversations between you and your friends or your boyfriend or girlfriend, or your fiance, your spouse, because that is our goal here, is to just help good conversations around faith and relationship.
If you want more from this particular discussion, I did write a much longer article on Substack that kind of gives more of the breakdowns of the different arguments and then exact quotes from St. John Paul II's different audiences for Theology of the Body, and just lays out a little bit more of where JP2 would be coming from if he was part of this discussion. But for now, leave us a 5-star review, leave us any comments, subscribe, like, do all the things to help this apostolate keep growing, and we will see you at the next episode.